Okay, we are on air now, and on this, and here with us is Mohd Shahnawaz. I'm sorry, Mohd
Shah
Shahnawaz. Yes, President of Government Blockchain Association in United Arab Emirates, and his topic is about building world's first blockchain city. Word is yours. Go ahead.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everybody. I am Mohammed Shanwaz, President of Government Blockchain Association, or GBA UAE as it's called. GBA is basically a technology agnostic global association whose mission is to promote and accelerate blockchain adoption in government sector via education, advocacy, and partnerships. We have around 50 chapters around the world and headquartered in Virginia, USA. GBA UAE was started recently around February, and where we had many thought leaders and blockchain professionals come to our webinars and discuss different blockchain projects. This week we have one blockchain prominent personality coming. He is also known as the father of blockchain. More in the end of this, towards the end of the talk. We so one disclaimer is that the Government Blockchain Association is not affiliated with any government entity or private entity. We don't endorse any projects which I'm going to mention, and it should be only used for educational purpose and not constitute as legal, financial, or investment advice. So, Dubai. Today's discussion is Dubai. Dubai is a city located in the United Arab Emirates. In 1960s, it was really a small trading city in Middle East, selling pearls, dates, and now it's one of the most visited city in the world. Since the discovery of oil, the government of Dubai has diversified in different sectors, and one of the sector they are betting on is emerging technology. That's in AI, blockchain, and IoT. So, so they have many government departments who have been the mandate to implement the industries of these emerging industries in Dubai. As you see, this is the building of Museum of Future, where they host and showcase different emerging technology. This building was completely made by algorithm, and it's a very complex building, and much more complex than even the tallest building in the world. So today we're going to talk about one of the government arm who's been a forefront in implementing different technology. That is Smart Dubai. Smart Dubai main initiative is to make Dubai the smartest city in the world. Smart Dubai has two main initiatives. They have many initiatives, but two main initiatives are, one of them is paperless initiative. Paperless initiative is where in April 2017, the Crown Prince of Dubai, His Highness Sheikh Hamdan bin Mohammed, he basically instructed the government to make the government paperless. That is by 31st December 2020, the last paper should be used. That means by 2021 we have to be using. I mean, we have to use completely digital transform. You don't have to use any paper. So this is one of the papers initiative. The second initiative, before I go to second initiative, we talk about blockchain. So blockchain, those who don't know what blockchain is, blockchain is basically a decentralized database with three main properties. It's immutable. Uh, it is also it's also transparent, where the stakeholders can see the data, and also it's traceable. You can track the provenance in the blockchain. So all this enables trust. So you're moving the trust from a person or a central authority to a system. So, so what are the applications we could use blockchain for? So back in 2016, one of the things of blockchain, one of the initiatives by Smart Dubai was blockchain strategy. So blockchain strategy had three main pillars. One is government efficiency, where they want to completely transform and become paperless, so there's less friction in between different users of the government services. The second thing is industry creation. The government basically encourages the creation of different sectors in UAE, that is and enabling blockchain in banking, healthcare, transportation, urban planning sector. So, and the third is since Dubai is leading a role in implementing the blockchain tech, they want to share the best use cases of blockchain tech around the world. So they have a different initiative, like they have Future Blockchain Summit, which is one of the largest blockchain summit, where there are different exhibitors, thought leaders coming in and exchanging the best use case. And also they have Global Blockchain Council, which is around 42 different entities around the world. They share the best use case of the blockchain. So the mandate is that by 2021, minimum of 50% of the government service entities must use blockchain. So now, since we are a bit short of time, so I won't tell, there's so many blockchain projects, more than 20, 24, more than 30 projects, ongoing projects. I'm going to tell only the 5 prominent project if you have time. So the first project I'm going to talk about is Lost Passport project. It was made by the company Avanza, and basically 4 entities of the government: the Dubai Police, courts, public prosecution, and GDRFA. GDRFA is basically the government entity which takes implements basically the authority that issue visas. So since you know that 75 or around 70 to 80% of residents in UAE are expatriates, so one of the main document of identity is passport. So at this moment of time, if somebody loses passport, what happens is that they go to Dubai Police and file a report of missing passport. So Dubai Police gives a paper and asks them to go to court, which they have to stand in court in public prosecution. They have to go to GDRFA and go back to Dubai Police so they can get a lost certificate. And then they go back to embassy, and embassy basically issues new passport. They go back to GDRFA. So this is like multi-step process. So the reason it's multi-step is that the government at the moment don't have any means to communicate with each other securely. So blockchain was recently implemented, so the person has to go to Dubai Police and basically file a report of lost passport. Then they'll have to then they'll get right away, they'll get the lost certificate, and they go to embassy, and then they go to GDRFA to get new visa. So it moved, the process was reduced from a week to 1 day. So this is one of the mandates. It really fits in with one of the blockchain strategy government is trying to implement. The second project, which is one of the highlight, is Donor Health Tech. Let me give you a background. In 1991, World Health Organization basically forbade organ sales. That means you can buy and sell organ. So which basically resulted in rise of demand of organs, because they're not organs readily available. There's a huge demand and less supply. According to our American Transplant Foundation, in states alone, every 10 minutes, one new person is added on the wait list, waiting for the transplant. And as a result, 20 people die every day in USA waiting for a transplant. So if you just in USA, a lot of people die around the world just to wait for the organ transplant. And the lack of organs has resulted in black markets, and governments around the world are trying to find ways to basically decrease the waitlist time, at the same time tackle the organ trafficking. So one of the ways they do is that they have a registry where people who wants to pledge to donate the organs, if something happens to them or the loved one, they could pledge there. And if anything happens to them, so the hospital can basically broadcast to other hospitals that there's this organ like kidney or heart available. So what is this donor blockchain does is basically matches the DNA of recipient who's waiting for the organ transplant to the donor. So it saves a lot of time and effort. This project was actually started by a 14-year-old kid. His name was Ryan Mahabi. He was watching a Disney channel, and he saw one guy who was wearing a T-shirt asking for the organ. So he researched. Was moved by it. He researched and he took action. He studied the problem the world is facing, and there was a hackathon organized by Ministry of Health in Dubai, and he presented. The minister was really moved, and he basically asked him, "Do you have any adult who's going to implement this project?" And that's how his father came in, and they started this project. They funded it, and it's now at the moment it's out of proof of concept and implementing it. So as a result, World Economic Forum, they basically selected Donor as one of the blockchain projects to look out for. The third project I want to talk about is Verifax. Verifax basically does three things. It's a medicine delivery app which verifies the authenticity of medicines. And second thing it does is that it checks whether the medicine has been damaged or tampered. The third main thing is since UAE has very strict laws of controlled medicine are basically those medicines which, if you take it, you have risk of getting addicted. So government regulates it. So the government has to ensure the right patient is receiving the prescribed medicine. So Verifax basically first authenticates it, the prescribed medicine. Then they have a special box, which is temperature controlled, and only the person can take the medicine. You have to know that many people cannot go to pharmacy and pick up the medicine. So when the pharmacy delivers this medicine, they use the biometric, like finger thumb or eye scan to get the medicine. This is now on the proof of concept, and it's going to be implemented soon because governments are basically asking to prevent the opioid abuse. So our fourth project is Trade Connect project. It is basically a project started by Etisalat and 8 other banks. Etisalat is basically a telecom company, leading telecom company in the region. And their main aim is to digitize trade finance and processes and combat fraud. So what it does in one good thing about this is that it combats fraud in invoice discounting. If those people who don't know what is invoice discounting is, for example, if you're getting paid in 30 or 60 days, you go to bank and say that, please, can you give me the cash so it can so you can get the cash flow and you can get the money and bank, and basically your customer pays the bank, and banks basically take small cut. So what is happening right now is people are using the same invoice and going different banks and taking out money. So, and after taking out the money, they leave the country. The problem is so prevalent that a lot of banks lost money and they moved out of the SME sector because the fraud is costing them a lot of money. So they hired this company Avanza and they partnered with Etisalat, and they were implementing this. They already passed the proof of concept, and they're going to launch in the mainnet. So what it does is that it's a system of AI, blockchain, and bots. Let me just show you where you upload the invoice, and what the AI does is that it checks for the invoice. So, because people don't put the same amount, it checks the logo, it checks the signature, and matches if the same invoice was issued to other banks. So it checks for duplicate invoicing and over invoicing. Over invoicing means if the same steel product is like $2, if the person mentions $10 in the other invoice, so it's a red flag. And also finds out whether the buyer and the seller are real. So it checks the website, it checks the tax number, and the social media, how long they have been there in the business, and then gives an overall score, and also gives a score of different categories. So this uses blockchain to securely share the data between different banks without really revealing a lot of information of their customer. The main future aim is to of this bank is basically to use this project for cross-border checking, which could immensely reduce the the cost of doing business and giving out loans, which is the case right now. Our fifth project right now is UAE Vault. UAE Vault is basically a repository which stores the passport copies, national ID, and different identity credentials of a user, and where the organization, like different organizations, can seamlessly share with each other. So you don't have to repeatedly take your documents to, say, for example, is for getting a SIM card, then and opening a bank account. Now all you have to do is the service provider basically asks you uh, whether it's okay to provide your documents to a third party, and once you say okay, which all the documents are basically stored in a file. Hash of the file is stored in the blockchain, and it's stored in IPFS. So securely stored. So if a service provider asks for identity, you can basically do two things. You can say which documents to show. At the same time, you could also tell until when to show and revoke the access. So this digital transformation has already been implemented federally all over the UAE, and this is enabling to save a lot of time and effort and energy. Also, it seamlessly gets along with the paperless initiative with Smart Dubai. So now it's the situation is such that you don't have to carry a passport to check. I mean, go through immigration. You could just use a finger print and move in and out of the airport. So what is the advantage of the UAE Vault? So UAE Vault, the user's perspective is that as you know, there's COVID-19. Like you can save your time and energy in traveling all the way to the government, and also you don't have to use paper. So another thing from the issues, those organizations which issues those identity, they don't have to give physical ID. They can provide a digital ID. So all this has resulted in as a result of all the projects. They're estimating that they're going to save up to $3 billion in the paperless strategy. So just to give an idea, the tallest building in the world, Burj Khalifa, cost like $1.5 billion. So the saving is up to two buildings. So also it helps to reduce greenhouse gases, and the good thing is that by 2020, as a result, 14 Dubai entities basically cut their paper consumption by 64%. So we are on track to meet the objective. And Dubai was recently awarded the first Smart City on Blockchain Award in Barcelona Expo. So I have a couple of minutes left. So I want to tell. So these are the many projects here, from say logistics to banking to finance. There are many projects. They're being implementing exciting projects, which you can find in our website. So we have the founding father, Scott Stroneda, coming in. The Satoshi white paper has 8 references. 3 of the references were used by Scott Stroneda. So he's coming on 30th May. If you're interested, just type, just follow the link, and we look forward to to seeing you. And if you have any questions, please let me know. How many minutes do you have?
Yes, we can ask you just one question because we have only 1 minute left.
Okay. So who will ask a question?
Actually, we have the viewers. Yeah, there is no question from that side because here
Okay.
waiting or the next speaker. Thanks a lot. Just please unshare your screen. Just show up your face, and we are going out of the YouTube channel at this moment. Yes, thanks a lot.
Yeah. So
thanks for your amazing speech.
Thanks a lot. Thanks.
Okay,
so,
I want to say
thanks a lot. Thanks, Sergey.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Okay, good. Now we are live on Facebook, we are on air, and our next speaker is Steve Kayzo. The word is yours.
Hi, thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Stephen Kelso, and I'm head of capital markets at ITI Capital. ITI is a multi-asset investment bank focused on emerging markets. We have about 200 people in 5 countries. We believe that digital assets are more relevant to more people in emerging markets than they are to many in developed markets. We believe that digital assets are an extension of the emerging markets investment phenomenon, which is essentially characterized by less efficient capital flows. At ITI, we consider digital assets as just another asset class. ITI specializes in fixed income, commodity, and equity finance, derivatives and structured products, DMA and electronic access to many emerging and developed markets and exchanges. Our digital asset trading business platform combines one of the biggest OTC crypto players in several emerging markets with a long-standing prime broker in traditional assets. And we would, of course, be delighted to hear from anyone looking to trade. What I'm going to talk about is our view on the multi-asset allocation we expect to see into digital assets for the post-COVID stage of the investment cycle. So first of all, what is multi-asset? Multi-asset investing has come to dominate traditional asset management since the great financial crisis. When rates were slashed during the zero and negative interest rate policy regimes, the bonds alone no longer sufficed to meet the liabilities of investors. Hence, investors were forced up the risk curve in increasing amounts into other asset classes beyond bonds. The GFC and the ensuing global policy responses radically changed the accepted risk-reward characteristics within asset classes and the dynamics of the relationships between asset classes. So, for example, equities became the go-to asset class for income, previously garnered from bond coupons, whilst bonds traded on negative yields in the anticipation only of capital growth, previously accessed via growth equities. Now, the first rule of risk management is diversification. Balanced funds had gained traction as long ago as the 1960s, with a static allocation of typically 60% to bonds, which were considered safe, and 40% allocation to equities, which were considered then higher risk growth assets. The sharp contraction in bond yields following the GFC drove a rapid evolution and expansion of multi-asset investing across a large array of constructs and strategies. Previously the domain of the hedge fund multi-strategy vehicles, global tactical asset allocation giants delivered much more sophisticated investment portfolios to retail and pension funds. Now, the significance of the UK market is pronounced. So the UK asset management industry is the second largest after the US at about £9 trillion. The UK represents about 37% of the European total. At the end of December 2017, it was bigger than France, Germany, and Switzerland put together. Institutional clients account for about 80% still, with pension funds being about 45% of the total AUM. And about 70 to 75% of the assets are still actively managed, down from 85% 10 years ago, as passive investing and smart beta funds continue to gain ground globally. There are about 1,850 authorized investment firms in the UK, and the top 10 manage over 50% of the total assets. And these are all multi-asset managers. Also significant about the London market is that about 40% of the assets under management are managed for international investors. And London has been the main portal for capital flows between emerging markets and developed markets for 300 years. It's a similar story for Switzerland, and it's no coincidence why they have emerged as the two crypto capitals of Europe, London and particularly the Zug-Zurich area. The impact of the COVID and the whole pandemic on the economy and markets has obviously been brutal. US and European markets initially considered corona to be localized in China and Asia, and for the most part assumed it would pass like SARS. Then, of course, things took a sharp turn for the worse in March, compounded, of course, by the price war in oil, and the rest is history. 9.4% of companies in Spain went bankrupt in March alone, and economists and strategies now refer to this as the Great Corona Recession, the GCR. Back in the GFC, it took years for policymakers to debate and agree their choice of and use of weapons, such as quantitative easing, against the moral hazard of bailing out the banks. Back then, the US led the way, and very quickly the markets learned not to fight the Fed, as the S&P bottomed 6 months after Lehman collapsed in March 2009, and it rarely looked back. Today, policymakers can't help with the short-term to medium-term effects of social distancing, but they can seek to mitigate the household and corporate distress by providing a bridge for the economy. Again, the US has led the way. Congress approved massive stimulus whilst the Fed has slashed rates again with huge liquidity injections and unlimited quantitative easing to ease lending. Japan has announced combined monetary and fiscal stimulus totaling a massive 40% of GDP. And Europe's recovery fund, tabled at $500 billion, is being well received thus far. But household name companies are failing all over the world. Society now has a strengthening voice on issues of social responsibility and corporate tax avoidance. There are growing calls that governments and private sector need to work more closely together. Investment managers are dealing with the fastest bear market ever and need simple, transparent products to help them manage the risks of liquidity, leverage, and volatility. And this is where Bitcoin comes in. The tip of the spear of the multi-asset movement are the US endowment funds, led by the likes of David Swensen at Yale, who has pioneered the application of modern portfolio theory over his 35-year tenure. MIT, Harvard, and other endowments have all adopted the modern portfolio theory approach that Markowitz won his Nobel Prize for. These endowments announced that they had begun investing in digital assets 2 years ago, long before the GCR. The attraction was less the fear of missing out, but more the sober benefit of increased diversification from another asset class that was not totally correlated to gold, let alone equities, fixed income, commercial real estate, and the other asset classes. The definition of Bitcoin as digital gold is maturing today as the debate about its price drivers evolves. Gold investors point out that whilst Bitcoin resembles gold on the supply side, the demand side is very different, arguing that the value lies more in the network defining Bitcoin. Nonetheless, there is growing acceptance in the scarcity value that Bitcoin represents. At times like this, multi-asset managers are very much looking to their portfolio diversifiers to shore up performance of their funds. The 30% bounce in the S&P and similar rebounds in other asset classes from the March lows have put increased pressure on multi-asset managers to figure out quickly at what point they start to add risk again. All of this is happening at a much accelerated rate to the GFC, when investment and governance committees had much more time to pause and think. One of the most significant developments towards the institutional adoption of digital assets is, of course, Paul Tudor Jones' announcement that he has invested his fund in Bitcoin futures. It has been no secret that Tudor Jones and other successful macro managers have been personally invested in digital assets for years. But the groundbreaking development is that his firm has taken the non-trivial steps of navigating the internal and external processes required with stakeholders and investors and decided that the risk-reward opportunity makes sense now. Under the title of The Great Monetary Inflation, Tudor's letter to investors this month sets out in detail his thesis for Bitcoin, as COVID-19 is a one-of-a-kind virus, he says, that has triggered a one-of-a-kind policy response globally. Tudor draws parallels with the rise and fall and subsequent takeoff of gold back in the late 70s, when access had just been opened up via the futures market. Tudor's loud and proud approach has both de-risked the personal career choice for traditional investment managers and made the case very clearly for attention to be paid to the potential onset of inflation that's on the horizon. When Bitcoin collapsed in March, skeptics were quick to question the safe haven status. However, remember that gold also fell 30% during the GFC from $1,000 to $700 before going on to nearly triple at $1,900. Morgan Stanley's chief economist has taken a very bold position, claiming that inflation will make a comeback again in this investment cycle after 30 years. He states that the aggressive, coordinated expansion of monetary and fiscal policy will be reflationary, and Morgan Stanley see a high risk that policymakers will prolong this response and also disrupt the structural disinflationary forces of the last 30 years, which they refer to as the 3 Ts of big tech, trade, and industry titans dominating their sectors. Morgan Stanley called that inflationary pressures will emerge from 2022, preceded by growing concerns about the global economic outlook. So in summary, at ITI, we see a growing interest from sophisticated investors and institutional clients starting to build positions in digital assets, particularly Bitcoin, in dollars, but also in euro and sterling. These are sophisticated investors many of whom were buying gold in euros and sterling, which was a hedge fund favorite trade during the GFC and also the European crisis of 2012. There are growing expectations for Bitcoin to continue showing a similar path at this juncture. However, not just sophisticated hedge funds, family offices, but the largest multi-asset managers are also now increasingly paying attention. Alpima, which is a research consultant to several household name asset managers, has powerful research on the performance benefits from allocating a modest low-digit percentage of Bitcoin to a range of multi-asset portfolios of varying complexity. So we think with career risk reduced, inflation risks increased, access improved to the asset class, and an asset, very importantly, that has such high octane upside potential without leverage, we believe that we will see a sharp increase in the adoption of digital assets led by Bitcoin by multi-asset managers. Thank you for your time.
Steve, you have a couple of minutes maybe for one of the questions from our audience. Yes,
sure.
Thank you for your great speech. Yes, I have to check it out. Just wait a second, please. It's not so easy for me. I'm sorry. Yes, a lot of
problem.
pages. Yeah. Okay, what kind of question I have? You are talked about multi-asset allocation. How do you see how it's going to be used after this COVID? What's happening? What's going to be changed? Because blockchain industry, it already appears much more than 5 to 6 years. I'm talking about smart contracts. I'm talking about Ethereum platform. What's going to be changed?
On the multi-asset side, I think Bitcoin is very clearly going to dominate with the big multi-asset managers because of this inflation. I hesitate to use the word hedge, but certainly a diversifier that is not 100% correlated to gold. So I think that is clearly what led to those endowments entering the space 2 years ago. And I think now more of the multi-asset community is getting that same message. You mentioned smart contracts and other digital assets though. And again, one of the big dynamics that is coming out of the market's reaction, and obviously this 30% higher knee jerk we've seen in the S&P, but right across risk assets, is that actually the primary market has been very strong. So of course now with so many companies and any sector you care to mention distressed and in need of a lifeline, these companies are in very, if they're not in dire need to raise money, they certainly have CFOs who are experienced enough to know that they should be raising money when they can. And again, I think of the three chessboards in digital assets, the one that has actually moved the most for me in terms of an expectation of success in sort of short to medium term is that of tokenization. And I can see a growing number of certainly the sell side investment bank community, who of course, to whom securitization has been their bread and butter for decades. I can see now a lot of these people realizing that we're not talking about revolutionary digital assets here. We're talking about an evolution to, one of the mainstays of finance for the last 40, 50 years, right? So I can see that a lot of these people will start to appreciate, rather than costing, say, $500,000 to list their equity to IPO, suddenly now actually it's a fraction of that. And furthermore, even 12 months ago, certainly 15 months ago, I had not come across a platform that I could put my hand on heart and say, wow, okay, I really believe that, this can now work. And actually that is changing rapidly. And I think now there's clearly a race to the line in different jurisdictions about who's going to be first to that. So I think this dawn of the digital asset era is absolutely upon us as well. But I don't believe that those will be the first assets necessarily to be included by the big multi-asset managers.
Okay, sure. Steve, thank you for your time. Thank you for your great speech. I really appreciate it. What's your mind thoughts? Yes, now we have to go out of our on-air channel and have to go forward to our next speaker. Steve, once more time, thanks a lot for you, and see you a bit later, or maybe on another conferences as well.
Been a pleasure. Thanks, guys.